top of the block. We'll show that in a second. Then we'll get the oil pan on and the bottom's buttoned up, and we're ready to move on to the top, and we're almost done building this engine. So what this oil slinger does is pretty much this engine's guaranteed to leak without it. No matter how careful you are, how well you polish the spacer, which we'll be replacing the spacer later. I'll see if I can get it to show up here. There's a pretty good little groove worn in it. There you go, you can see it. There's a pretty good little groove worn in here, and that's just from hundreds of thousands of miles. And you gotta remember, this engine's lived 2 or 3 lives. It lived a life in a car, then it lived a couple, about 100,000 miles in the same truck it's going back in, then it got rebuilt again, went another 25 or so thousand miles, and now we're doing it again because it's been sitting for 20 years, which was why we didn't have to bore it and clean up the piston. We just cleaned the pistons up, put them, because they were all low mileage new stuff. We did put new bearings and surfaces and all in it, but this is what I would call a reliable A-, B+ built engine for spirited driving, good dependable reliability, but it's not a full-blown race build. It's just a really good straight strip hot rod engine. Now, this goes on this keyway. Goes right up against your timing chain. And what you want to check for clearance, and it's tight down here, is that the slinger is not hitting the pins in the chain, because that's the closest point to them. Now it's spinning with it, so the only place it may touch is right here where there's a little bit of angle action going on. And I'll see if I can't bring the camera down and get a little bit better shot of that. And then your balancer spacer goes on. Timing cover's got to go on before the spacer goes on. So what we're going to do to get ready for that, and we're going to get us a little bit of the lubricator plate, and we're going to go right inside this seal, and we're just going to give it a nice coating. And what's this going to do, you can also use white lithium grease for this if you don't have any lubricator plate. What this is going to do is keep the seal from sticking to that spacer. And you want to go, make sure you go all the way around. What that's going to do is make sure that this slides in easy when you push it in. Now, you'll also notice that this has got a real heavy bevel on it. That's to help it go through that seal. And what you want to be able to do is wiggle it in. And then once you're in, turn it gently till you catch that keyway. And you'll see me do all this in a minute. So I'm going to set this back here. It's ready to go on the engine. I'm going to set the balancer spacer here. And what we're going to do next is give one last wipe, which this is good and clean. Let me check here. I may not need to. I need to wipe it. It's got a little bit of built up on it from setting. You know, things get oily and they do collect dust. You want to make sure you wipe it all off real good. And as you can see, I'm steady picking up stuff. We don't want to spray this on the engine because, well, we might break down some of our assembly lubes and stuff that we've got in place. So we're going to spray it on the rag. And then we're going to run right around and give it a good clean. So because we are dealing with some older items on this one, I'm going to use the thick gasket that came in the main timing set, the main gasket set, instead of the little thin blue Velcro. Now, a lot of people think these big gaskets tend to leak worse, but they got a bit of a rubbery consistency to them, and I've found I've had better luck with them on the street builds. I'll use the thin ones on the race builds. So it's going to go on there that way. A lot of people use RTV. Some people use nothing. Some people use high tack. I use Permatex aviation sealer. Had good luck with it over the years. And it comes out kind of thick and stringy. It's a little runny. And what I'm going to do is I want to go all the way around. I want to go around my bolt holes. Now, this looks a little messy when you first put it on, because it does tend to kind of go everywhere, and it does run down with gravity. I want to go ahead and get around right up to the edge of the block. Go up here on top, but don't cake it on up here, but go over where the oil pan gasket's going to go. And it's pretty obvious where the oil pan sits on the, where the timing cover sits on these engines. paint my way all the way around. Now a little bit of carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner, acetone will take this stuff off. Same thing, you want to go all the way around. Any that drips over the outside, don't worry about it. You don't want it to get runny, and as you can see, it's getting kind of tar-like. It's kind of a combination of sealer and high tack. I know that's not exactly what it is, but that's kind of how it behaves. It doesn't gush out for the most part and go all over the place like RTV unless you get a run in it, and then it really shows up, but you can't wipe it off. So you don't want to get it on your fingers because you're going to get it all over everything you touch. And you know, when it's really hot outside, and if you're having to work in the sun, it dries quick. But we're in here in this nicely air-conditioned shop today, thanks to my buddy here, which this is his engine, and that extra set of hands in the video. So I'm not exactly working alone today. We're not going to worry about the bottom down here where the oil pan goes. Right now, we're just getting this in place. With the gasket lined up. Alright, so what we're going to do now is the fun part. Now another thing about these engines, they got big bolts and they got little bolts. What I'm going to do right now is get this big bolt and this big bolt, because they're the easiest big bolts to get to without a socket and an extension. And we're going to take this and we're going to drop down into place here. And we're going to come over to the snout of the crankshaft. And I'm going to come up here and start this bolt. But I'm not going to let this timing cover touch the block yet. So now you got the oil slinger in there. After you've done this a few times over the years. And that's when you remember it's your craftsmanship process. It's all about process and craftsmanship. And you know, without looking, that's in there. Even though you were busy talking to the camera. Well, man, I should have set this up before I started doing this. And you want to get them all started. You want to do this where it's on the engine. And you run this up until you get a bouncer cover. There we go again. See the time cover hanging pretty low. And it's about now you go, oh man, did I put the oil slinger in there? After you've done this a few times over the years. And that's when you remember that you've practiced your process, and it's all about the process and the craftsmanship. And you know, without looking, that that's in there, even though you were busy talking to the camera and going, man, I should have set the nuts up before the sockets up before I started doing this. And you want to get them all started. And you want to move this before it drips on the engine. Now you want to run this up until you get that balancer cover, there I go again, until you get the timing cover hanging pretty level. Then you want to grab your balancer, spacer, get it on your crank, come in and find your keyway, and it'll just kind of drop right in like that. Alright, now what we want to do now is just barely run them up till they touch. Because now we got to level up here. I got a little bit of gasket overhang here. Okay, so here's the handle off the combination square. And what I'm going to do is sit this down here. And I can move the timing cover. So what I want to do is get this as level as I can with the block. Now I'm going to drop y'all down. Okay, so what we want to do is get this timing cover as level with this block as we possibly can. And the easiest way to do that is just slide along. And this side's pretty good. But this side, I can move a little bit. Now as you can see, the gasket's starting to grab. So what I'm going to do is, this one's holding its own pretty good. Now this side I need to go up a little bit. So I'm going to grab it, push it up, and I'm going to run this nut, this bolt in. And it just moved up when I pulled it. So now I got to go back over here, which I should have pushed this side down. And these bolts are actually like starter bolts. They got a little push to them on these things. Now see, it's done come up and splooged onto my square here a little bit. But that's okay, so we'll wipe that excess out. And we're going to address that again in a second. So we're going to go ahead and hold that in place. That's pretty good and level. Come back over here. It's good and level. I can actually push this side back down a little teeny bit. Let's see if it'll move. There we go. That side's level. Wipe our surfaces again. That'll work. And that'll work. So now we're going to go ahead and work our way down. Got that 1/2 inch. Nope, this is perfect for what we're doing. Now these are the 4 important bolts as far as this balancer sleeve is concerned. This being level and this being in here will let that seal take its set it's going to take. And this is another one of those places where the little shorty ratchet's wonderful, because you're not dealing with massive amounts of torque. You just want to get a good sealing surface. And as this thing sits here and the gasket crushes down, it's like everything else. You'll see it move because you're squishing the gasket and the lubes, the stickies coming out, and the aluminum's taking a set. Stuff moves when you tighten it up. So don't be in a hurry. Throw some light in here. This is the oil slinger I was talking about. That little thin piece of metal you can see right there. And you can see how close it is to the timing chain. Let me back this light out so it's not so blinding. You can see how close it is to the timing chain pins. And it's also right up against the seal. That's what's going to keep us out of trouble and help keep the bulk of the oil away from the seal. Okay, so the next thing we got to do is put the oil pan on, and we're moving right along now.